Hi, everybody. Jacob Panka here. And I have with me Paul Boehnke, life coach. And we are here to discuss what is a life coach and learn more about a less common member of your healthcare team, somebody you might not have expected to work with, somebody you might not be familiar with, to learn more about this awesome field of life coaching. I've been really impressed with it, and I'm really eager to hear from Paul. What is a life coach, and why do people hire one?
That's a good question, Jacob. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. So what is a life coach? Well, here's one way to sort of think about it. So how many of you actually have someone in your life who listens to you without judgment, without trying to fix you, and without putting their own agenda into the conversation? Most people say not many, they don't have someone like that in their life. Well, that's pretty much what I do as a coach. Coaching is really, it's a proven process that helps people improve their lives. And when there's something that, we want, but we just can't quite seem to get it to come true in our lives, there's something else that's blocking the way. And coaching is about sort of ferreting out those blocks and discovering ways to step over them. People seek out coaches for lots of different reasons. Some want help navigating career moves or navigating relationships. Some simply just want to get healthier or wealthier or happier. Coaching is for those whose life is, well, good enough. It's not bad, but it's not that great either. And they understand that this is their one great journey through life. And frankly, good enough just isn't good enough for them. Some also say that sort of the difference between something good and something great is coaching. Most people who come to me, they tend to come seeking one of two things, either more meaning or purpose in their lives, or because they have this feeling that, this voice in their head that, well, causes so much self-doubt and so much bad feeling. It has too much influence in their life, and they really want to get out from under its messages. That's pretty much the reasons that people come working with me.
That's really well put, and I'm really interested to hear more. How did you find this field? Why did you become a coach?
Yeah, well, there's kind of two parts to that story, really. Before I became a coach, I actually spent many years as a classical musician. And really, being an artist is really about so much more than just sort of mastering the tools of your art. It's really about becoming a master of yourself, uncovering your own hidden fears, motivations, habits, so that those things really aren't in the way of your expression as an artist. And that was one of the most satisfying parts to me about being an artist, is uncovering all those things about myself. And it turned out to be one of the most satisfying parts of teaching students as well, because I was able to help them uncover their own hidden fears, motivations, and habits, and just sort of watch them bloom in really beautiful ways. And well, the second part of the story is that as a performer, I needed to basically train my mind, my body, and my emotions so that they work together in order to play music well, and they all had to do their part pretty much on cue. So that's kind of what I got good at, getting my brain, my body, and my emotions to do what I needed them to do when I needed them to do it. And then, well, later in life, there were still some of those messages, some of those things that were still blocking me a bit, kept me stuck in some way. And these messages in my head, they kept arguing, frankly, for my limitations. They were telling me all the reasons why I couldn't do all sorts of things. And eventually, I just decided to turn those mind training skills I learned as a performer towards reprogramming the thoughts of self-doubt. And when I could see that that actually worked, I knew that I really had the power to not only change my life, but the lives of others as well. And that's really when I decided to become a coach.
Wow. Yeah, that is That is interesting to think about. If you've got me, I'm thinking about how this self-doubt, this voice kind of shows up in my own life right now. And I'm curious, what do you see in some of the clients you work with? How does that show up for them?
Ah, great question. And what's interesting is it's really different for everyone. Self-doubt can show up in, well, practically infinite number of ways. Among them, some of the most obvious ones are hesitation or confusion or second guessing. It can show up as criticizing or judgment or fear or shyness, bravado. Some people, it shows up as sort of they need outside validation, or they become very inflexible, or they're overly rational or overly emotional. It can show up as impatience, as constant apologizing, denial. This list can go on and on forever. But maybe what's most interesting is that at the root of virtually all these self-doubts is really the feeling that we're just not quite good enough in some way. Self-doubt tends to focus on our sense of self-worth. And it's just that it shows up in an amazingly wide range of ways. So yeah, it's such a chameleon. Self-doubt is such a shapeshifter. As soon as we begin to sort of hone in on one thing that's going on, it looks like something else. That's why we need to really get to the root of it in order to change it.
Interesting. So is there a standard method that you use to help individuals reprogram that voice? Because I know we've talked about some approaches in our work together, and I felt like it really hearing from you kind of how this energy shows up. It's not just self-doubt necessarily. There's different responses that we were discussing, and whether you're stressed or you're in a more comfortable setting, it can show up differently. So I felt like that was really profound for me to hear, all these different ways that that this energy kind of presents itself in your life. So I'm interested to hear more about that method of reprogramming that voice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The way in which we experience life is really determined actually by the thoughts that we have about the experiences. So much of us, so much of our experience, we tend to think comes from the outside into us. Something happens out there and that causes the experience that we have. But if you really dig a little deeper, you discover that it's the way we perceive things out there that actually determines how we experience them. So getting to the root of what's going on in here is really the key to changing the experience. And the process that I use with my own clients that I basically developed, from my time as a musician, and then also transitioning into a coach and seeing how these same skills can be transferred into many different ways. The process that I use basically has 4 different steps to it. The first one is simply recognizing that self-doubt and all those thoughts and messages that we tell ourselves are just a habit. They're just thoughts. They are not who we are. And so that's sort of the first step in sort of realizing that these thoughts and who I am are 2 separate things. They are not me. And we so often feel like these messages of self-doubt, these thoughts that we have, seem to have almost a power of their own, that they come upon us and we have to sort of fight against them all the time. And there's nothing we can do but sort of struggle against them for all of time. But really, all they are thoughts. And they're thoughts that have become habits. So that's really the first step, is simply to realize that, which basically says, lighten up, it's not that big of a deal, these thoughts. The second step is to look underneath those thoughts and to figure out what is the lie that these thoughts are actually telling me. Because at the root of all these self-doubts is always going to be something that's amiss, something that's not true. And when we can uncover what that lie is, that creates even more distance between us and those thoughts. And in this distance that's created, there's this little void, this space into which something new can flow, which leads us to our third step, is you want to create a new thought that will take the place of the old one. If you don't create something new about what you want, the old one will find its way back in. But if using the information that you've uncovered by looking at what the lie is underneath the self-doubt, using that information to create a new thought, a new message that you tell yourself that is strong, a message that feels empowering to you, and one that is believable as well, that really can begin to change the way in which you think about yourself. But the final step, which is really equally important, is simply then to practice that new message that you have for yourself. We don't very often think about practicing our thoughts. I mean, we just think them unconsciously. But that's actually the problem, is if we're thinking unconsciously, we're not having any input, any influence about what's going in. And they say garbage in, garbage out. Well, let's put in some good stuff. So that third step decides what it is that you want to put in. And the fourth step is to practice that thought. Think it over and over and over. That's how your old thoughts became habits. And so if we can really focus on the new thought and practice it until it becomes a habit, then you have reprogrammed that mind. It's a relatively simple, straightforward kind of process. Having a little help on some of the steps can be useful, but all in all, it's pretty simple and straightforward.
Thanks for going so in depth on that. This kind of felt like a mini coaching session. I always gain so much insight just in our conversations day to day, even when we meet, as doctor patient or otherwise. I always leave with something to think about and kind of in a new more productive way. So I really appreciate you for that. And I really want people to know how they can get a hold of you and learn more about what you do.
Absolutely. Well, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is just my name, paulboehnke.com. No spaces, no dots, just one giant word. And there's, of course, a contact page, which you can get a hold of me there. And also on this website, there are quite a few resources for free that people can begin using themselves if they're not able to start coaching with me this moment, or they can't wait until our first session. There's quite a few resources there on that website as well that you can make use of.
Thanks, Paul. This has been great. And I look forward to speaking more with you and sharing more about life coaching and what the future holds for us.
Great. Thanks so much for the invitation, Jake. It's been a pleasure talking with you.